On a November morning in 1989, a young woman was set to take a major step toward a new beginning. The day before, she had dropped off her 3-year-old son at her parents' home, preparing for an important court appearance that morning. But when her mother called early that morning, there was no answer. Concern turned to unease, and unease to dread. Arriving at her daughter's home just a short distance away, she found the house locked, silent, and eerily undisturbed. There was no sign of movement and no sign of her daughter at all. As hours turned into days, a chilling mystery began to unfold, one that would haunt a family, baffle investigators, and shock the entire community when the horrifying truth hidden in plain sight was finally revealed. This is the shocking case of Julie Hogg. Julie Hogg was born in 1966 in the United Kingdom and grew up in the tightly knit community of Billingham, Stockton-on-Tees. She was nurtured by her devoted parents, Anne and Charlie Ming, along with her 2 siblings, Gary and Angela, creating a warm and supportive upbringing. In her late teens, Julie encountered a kind and appealing local man named Andrew Hogg, and they married in 1985 when she was 18. Soon after, they settled into a council house at 27 Grange Avenue, conveniently located near her parents' residence, which enabled Julie to keep a close daily connection with her family through regular visits and daily calls with her mother. In 1986, Julie welcomed the birth of their son, Kevin, opening a new chapter as a mother. However, as the demands of parenthood grew, difficulties emerged in their marriage, especially after Andrew took a job opportunity in London, eventually leading to their separation by 1989. Despite these personal challenges, Julie remained a committed mother to her 3-year-old son, managing the intricacies of single parenthood while working evening shifts as a pizza delivery driver at a local establishment to support her family. Her strength was evident in the way she tirelessly worked to support her family while shouldering the emotional burdens of her own life challenges. With her home only a short distance from her parents, who lived close by, it became a center of family support, a true reflection of the values she cherished. Not much is known about her personal hobbies or interests, but one thing is clear: her world revolved around her son and family. She was a strong, caring woman, doing her best to build a better future, even in the face of life's challenges. On November 16, 1989, 22-year-old Julie Hogg brought her 3-year-old son Kevin to her parents' home, where he loved spending time with his grandparents, Anne and Charlie. At that time, as mentioned before, Julie was enduring a tough period, as she was in the midst of separating from her husband Andrew and needed to be in court early the next morning to file for an official separation. The following morning at 7:30 a.m., Anne called Julie but received no answer. Concerned that her daughter might have overslept, Anne went over to the house, which was just a short distance away, only to find all the doors locked and no sign of Julie. Anne felt an overwhelming sense of unease and phoned her son, who promptly arrived at Julie's house. Together, they managed to break in through the back door. Although there was no trace of Julie, one odd detail immediately caught their attention. The house was both unusually and impeccably clean. It might have been a coincidence, but something deep inside Anne warned her that something was amiss, so she promptly contacted the police. Even though it had only been a short time since Julie was last seen, Anne knew her daughter well and felt it was out of character for her to leave her son without informing the family. Julie was an adult, and with less than 24 hours having passed since she was seen, there seemed to be little they could do. At that time, mobile phones were not in use and social media didn't exist. The only ways to reach someone were by letter or via a landline telephone. After 4 days with no word from Julie, the police eventually relented and sent a forensic team to search the house. They thoroughly combed the entire property, yet nothing suspicious was discovered. Julie had seemingly vanished without a trace. As days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months with no sign of her return, the mystery deepened. Christmas came and went, leaving little Kevin confused and heartbroken over his mother's absence. Anne clung to the hope that Julie had simply run off somewhere safe, but that hope eventually turned to anger as she became upset that her daughter had abandoned her life and left her son behind. In February 1990, Julie's husband Andrew, who worked in London, planned to return to the home to care for Kevin and was given the keys. When he entered to clean off the fingerprint dust and other traces left by the police, an awful odor hit him, and he immediately called Anne to come over. As soon as Anne arrived, she felt instantly ill and sensed that something was gravely wrong. She headed upstairs, and as she neared the bathroom, the stench intensified. Leaning over the bathtub, she sniffed near the wall, and when her weight caused the bath panel to shift slightly, she realized it was loose. Anne pulled at the panel, and a horrific smell burst into the room. Ripping it off, she recoiled in horror as the naked, badly decomposed and partially mutilated body of her daughter was revealed. Julie had been hidden in the small gap behind the panel all along. After months of simmering anger at the belief that Julie had abandoned them, Anne was struck with overwhelming pain and sorrow when she realized her daughter had been in the house all along. Julie had been strangled, and the injuries, later described by prosecutors as gross, violent sexual injury, were believed to have occurred after death. In the wake of this unspeakable discovery, a murder inquiry was initiated, with Cleveland police dedicating about 40 officers to the case. One of the detectives who was part of the investigative team recalled the pervasive fear that gripped the town. Initially, the police compiled an extensive list of suspects, which included several men, one of whom was a man named Billy Dunlop. Born William Dunlop in 1963, Billy Dunlop was a labourer originally from Stockton-on-Tees. During the 1980s, he played football for the Billingham Black Swans and also served as the club's treasurer and secretary for 3 seasons. However, he later shifted his focus to rugby and by 1987 had joined Billingham Rugby Club. Reflecting on that period, Dunlop described his life as being completely ruled by sports. Although specifics about the investigation remain unclear, particularly why Billy became a primary suspect, the evidence against him included a key finding. Dunlop's fingerprints were discovered on Julie's keys. These keys were hidden beneath the floorboards of a house where Dunlop had been staying. Beyond this, there was little in terms of forensic evidence directly tying him to the crime. However, on February 13th, 1990, shortly after Julie's body was found, police arrested Billy Dunlop on suspicion of her murder. On the fateful evening of November 16, 1989, Dunlop attended a stag party at a rugby club in town. After the event ended, he went to a friend's house, which happened to be next door to Julie's. As he was leaving, he mentioned to others that he planned to stop by and say hello, having noticed her lights were still on. Dunlop was the last known person to see Julie Hogg alive. He allegedly visited her home, where Julie mocked him for injuries he had sustained in a fight earlier that evening. Enraged, he attacked her, strangling her before sexually assaulting her and attempting to conceal her body. He initially wrapped Julie's remains in a blanket and tried to hide her in the loft, but ultimately abandoning that plan, he crammed her into the narrow space behind the bath panel before leaving. In 1991, Dunlop was put on trial twice at Newcastle Crown Court for Julie's murder, but on both occasions, the jury failed to reach a verdict. After the second trial, he was officially cleared. At the time, this meant he was protected by the double jeopardy law, which prevented a person from being tried twice for the same crime. As the verdict was announced, Julie's mother collapsed in shock while the judge formally acquitted Dunlop. To make matters worse, in the weeks that followed, Dunlop shamelessly boasted in local pubs, bragging to anyone who would listen that he had gotten away with the perfect murder. Billy's troubles were far from over, and years later, while serving time in prison for a violent assault, he brazenly admitted to a prison officer that he was, in fact, responsible for Julie's murder. He had attacked an ex-girlfriend, stabbing her with a carving fork and brutally beating her new partner, and even behind bars, he continued to torment her. From prison, he sent letters threatening to do to her exactly what he had done to Julie. Alarmed, his ex-girlfriend handed the letters over to the police, but since he had already been tried for the murder, the law prevented them from taking action. An 800-year-old legal principle was shielding a known killer from facing justice. Dunlop was well aware of this loophole and openly boasted that no one could touch him due to the double jeopardy law. The most he could face was a perjury charge, a far lesser crime compared to murder. And that's exactly what happened. In 1999, he was sentenced to 6 years for 2 counts of perjury, a term he would serve after completing his existing 7-year sentence for the brutal attack on his ex-girlfriend. What Dunlop hadn't counted on, however, was the unwavering strength of a mother's love and Anne's relentless determination. She refused to let her daughter's murderer walk free. Everyone knew Dunlop had killed Julie. The police knew it. The community knew it, yet he was escaping justice. That was something Anne simply could not accept. She launched a campaign to ensure Julie received the justice she deserved. With the support of local MP Frank Cook and officers from Cleveland Police, Anne embarked on what would become a long and grueling battle to overturn the double jeopardy law. This law, originally meant to protect innocent people from being repeatedly prosecuted by an unjust system, was now shielding a known killer from facing the consequences of his crime. Over the years, many families of victims had fought tirelessly for justice, launching campaigns to challenge flawed legal rulings. One well-known case was that of Stephen Lawrence, a teenager murdered in 1993. Despite 5 suspects being charged, none were convicted. A public inquiry in 1999, led by Sir William Macpherson, ultimately found that the Metropolitan Police had acted with institutional racism. As a result of this inquiry, Macpherson recommended that the double jeopardy law be abolished in murder cases where compelling new evidence later came to light. In 2005, the Labour government abolished the law, convincing senior judges and legal experts that a more flexible approach was necessary for complex cases. The change officially took effect that year, allowing retrials in instances where new, compelling, reliable and substantial evidence had emerged, ensuring that justice could still be pursued even after an initial acquittal. With the partial repeal of double jeopardy, a retrial was ordered for Dunlop, making him the first person to be retried for murder under the new law. His case was heard at the Old Bailey, where officers from the original investigation watched from the gallery as the proceedings unfolded. On Monday, September 11, 2006, Dunlop pleaded guilty to Julie's murder, and on October 6, 2006, he was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 17 years. It had taken Anne 16 relentless years to see justice served, but at last, her daughter's killer was behind bars, exactly where he belonged. David Blunkett, who was Home Secretary when the double jeopardy laws were reformed, welcomed Dunlop's guilty plea, stating, "I'm glad that the heartfelt campaign led by Julie Hogg's family, along with others in similar situations, has been vindicated." He acknowledged the significant controversy and challenges in passing the legal change, noting that the opposition had voted against it. However, he emphasized that this milestone proved how essential it was to ensure justice prevailed and the truth was finally uncovered. He further remarked, "3 years ago, people argued about the medieval right not to be tried twice, as though fraudulently getting off was some sort of game in which, if you fooled the justice system once, you had got away with it forever. I hope that more unsolved murders, sexual assaults, and other heinous crimes will now be resolved." In 2018, news reports surfaced discussing the potential release of Dunlop. Julie's family was notified by the probation service that he was being considered for a transfer to an open prison and would become eligible for parole in 2021. This news outraged Julie's loved ones, with her now adult son, Kevin, calling it heartbreaking and expressing the deep emotional toll the entire ordeal had taken on their family. However, in 2019, Dunlop's request to be moved to an open prison was denied, and he continued to serve his sentence behind bars. Kevin shared with the Evening Gazette that the passage of time hadn't made things any easier. At 34 years old, he explained that instead of healing, he had simply developed new ways to cope. He spoke about how grief only deepened over the years, especially when thinking about his 11-year-old son, a constant reminder of everything his mother had missed. Every family milestone felt incomplete, as there was always an empty space where she should have been. What happened to Julie Hogg at the hands of this monster is truly tragic. Our heartfelt prayers and deepest thoughts go out to her memory and to the loved ones she left behind. If you found this video compelling, be sure to like and subscribe to our channel and check out our other videos. Thank you for watching.